Super excited to announce the Law Firm Retreat Design Your Future being held this August 5th through 8th, 2026 in the Denver, Colorado area. Teaming up with law firm architects, Power Strategy Group, we're going to be having an amazing opportunity for up to 15 firms to work on the business, not in the business. Find out more at powerstrategygroup.com.
They offered to make me a partner in the firm because I was hard to their revenue goals. And so they offered to make me a partner, and my response to that was like, okay, well, let's open up the book and take a look and figure out the value. And they were like, oh no, we're never going to open our book. And by the way, you're fired, get out.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, with Power Up Your Practice, and today's guest, I'm excited to have him, Jason Epstein. He's a partner of Premier Law Group in Bellevue, Washington, a Washington super lawyer, an ABA trial skills faculty, and adjunct professor at Seattle University School of Law. We connected due to our interest in teaching a law firm entrepreneurship, law practice management, and we were connected through another amazing another attorney, Ryan. So we're really grateful for that. And welcome to the show, Jason.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So you practice personal injury law. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
So how did you get into that space, and tell us a little bit more about your practice?
Going into law school that I didn't want to choose a path where how much money I could make was ultimately tied to the amount of hours I put in. And so, the billable hour was not something I was a fan of and not really interested for me. So I had to pick an area where there wasn't that correlation. And so it kind of, limits the choices to either doing, something where there's flat fees or something like I do, which is conclusion fees. I was, I guess, fortunate enough to have been in a car accident when I was in Los Angeles before I started law school. And so I hired a lawyer and spent some time with him, and I was just like, yep, this is it. This is what I want to do. And so it was organic there for me.
Interviewing so many people, I've heard that sometimes there's this one defining moment or the way they interact with law or law enforcement that inspires them to go into this field. It's quite fascinating, what I've learned through all these interviews. But I liked also what you said about that your time wouldn't be directly tied to what you earned. And I think so often that you sort of like that employee W-2 mentality is sort of, and even as lawyers in general, thinking that there's just I'm going to get a salary from this one job, and as opposed to having multiple revenue streams or being able to scale and to find other multiple opportunities to not be the traditional sort of model.
Yeah, I mean, tethering, the one thing we can't get more of in life is time, right? And you can always make more money. You can, always do just about anything, but you can't ever get more time. And so that was something I understood really early on, that your time is the most valuable resource you have. And so if you can figure out a way to meaningfully untether your ability to make money to the time you spend on it, it's probably going to lead you a healthy.
Right. And I think that's what we're also trying to teach with our classes is sort of like how to excel at having your firm, and so that you can have a life outside of it as well. So I mean, I think it's good that I keep teaching this, because then I'm keep listen I have to keep talking to myself as well, reminding me.
Yeah, no, it's 100% true. I mean, I find it going through things with the students, I'm reinforcing things that maybe learned years ago, and thinking about it on, looking at it through the different context of where I am now is changing how you. So it's going through the course is a great. It's a me as well for my business and refreshing kind of what's important.
So tell me a little bit more about your journey of building up your practice. like, how long have you had it? Well, what any stories you want to share about like some of the what you've learned as you've been building it?
Sure. Um, so I graduated in 2001, passed the bar. So I was licensed in 2001. And right out of law school, I hung out my own single, which was challenging and interesting. I mean, I didn't know anything. When I got a couple cases that came in the door that, weren't necessarily injury related, anything I could do. I had no idea how to do anything. It's like, law school doesn't pay you to be a lawyer in a meaningful way. And so I floundered around, and I was really fortunate that somebody kind of bailed me out and gave me a job. They liked my hustle, starting my own thing, and threw me a lifeline. And so I took a job for a personal injury lawyer, worked for him for a couple of years, really kind of got a pretty good grasp on how to actually practice law with him. And then I transitioned into another job. And that was kind of a weird story. I was there for a couple of years. And they offered to make me a partner in the firm because I was um, part of their revenue goals. And so they offered to make me a partner, and my response to that was like, okay, well, let's open up the book and take a look and figure out the value. And they were like, oh no, we're never going to open our book. And by the way, you're fired. Get out. Um, yeah. And so that was
By the
my
way, you're fired. Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah, that was my introduction to kind of the business of specifically personal injury law firms. I think most law firms operate in a scarcity mentality, but personal injury law firms like definitely
Hmm.
operate in a scarcity mentality. Um, and so I scrambled around for a little while after that. Um, Found another job, and by that time, at that job, it became very clear. And that job was at a more established firm that was um, run in a very corporate manner. Um, and it became clear to me at that job, if it wasn't clear before, that I was not a good employee for anybody. Um,
Hmm.
and, and I definitely think I'm at this point. I mean, I think I'm unemployable. I don't, like they had like their rules, and I'd be like, well, but that rule's stupid. And they'd be like, well, this is how that doesn't make sense. And so it didn't really fit well in the structured corporate environment. And so from there, I was fortunate enough to find my current partner, Patrick, and we hit it off at a CLE. Actually, it was a lawyer college CLE. So we were at a resort in Washington for like a 3 or 4 day CLE. And I don't know if you've ever done this. Is the olden days where lawyer college still very fence, and it was the OG of the lawyer college, and so we bonded through kind of the experience of going through that CLE, and we partnered up, and the rest is history. So that was around, I think, 2007 or 2008 when we partnered up, and since then, we built and grown the law group in a really organic and structured and controlled way, where we never got too big for ourselves. Um, and recently, about a year ago, actually, we took on a new partner, one of our
Hmm.
longtime associates. We gave him a public share, and so that's been kind of a new part of the journey. Is we worked really well with each other for 15 years, and then kind of bringing another voice into the decision making process has been interesting and a little bit of a challenge, but we're figuring it out and making it work.
This episode is sponsored by Candle AI, the legal email assistant that helps legal teams spend less time on client emails. You heard me right, spending less time on emails. Candle AI works with both Gmail and Outlook, so you don't have to learn a new tool. And then it connects with popular case management systems like Clio, Filevine, INSSoom, and more to come. It instantly shows you your case and the client details the moment you open a client email and right inside your inbox. then that means less context switching and time spent jumping to different tabs to figure out what you need to respond. Candle can also draft context-aware responses to client emails and makes it easy to create, edit, and manage your email templates. If you want to save time and take back control of your inbox, check out Candle AI. I highly suggest it. Okay, so I have a couple questions. My first, I want to go back to the scarcity mindset of the PI firms. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, so any case that comes in, a $5,000 legal fee, and it could be worth a $5 million legal fee. And so the value in a PI firm, in addition to like being able to bring in continual business, but the value is the inventory. And so anytime somebody looks like they may be leaving a PI firm, the owners become very possessive of the inventory. And so, we all know that there's like the ABA model rule that when the lawyer primarily handling a case is leaving, you're supposed to send this joint letter giving the client do they want to go to do they want to stay with the existing firm, or do they want to find somebody else? And there's supposed to be like this agreed upon thing where, a nice neutral letter goes out and the client makes a decision. In practice, what happens is when the ownership gets wind that somebody's going to leave, they lock them out. And that way, they're in control of the narrative. The joint letter probably will never go out in most cases. Most of the time, the people will just get reassigned a new attorney that's going to be handling their case, and they won't even really know that the original attorney that was handling it left. And they do that because, let's just pick a nice round number. Let's say that an attorney fee on a case is going to be $100,000. Well, if the original firm $3,000 less, whatever compensation is paid to the associate. But if the associate leaves and takes the case with them, under the quantum merit principles, you might split the fee between the two firms at like, 50-50, 60-40, 80-20, depending on how much work was done at each firm. And so that piece of inventory goes from being a $100,000 asset to the originating firm to, maybe a $50,000 asset or a $20,000 asset if the associate leaves. And so people do weird stuff for money. And so it's like that, the ethics rules and the model, what you're supposed to do don't matter. And it's like, get out. You don't have access to the computer files anymore. So you can't even try to send a neutral letter, even if you wanted to. It's all just on the shoulders of the firm that hired you. They're, of course, not going to do anything, or if they do anything to even let people know that an attorney is left. It's the narrative that they want, and so it's all about protecting.
I get what you're saying. Yeah,
that's different. If it was, if you were in a firm where there was like an hourly billing model, it's different because in PI you're front loading all the work and you're not getting paid for years. And so that can be a bitter pill to swallow for the firm that was planning on earning revenue.
Yeah, I can see with the billing payment model is really impacts that mindset. Okay, so then the next question I was going to ask, because I think there's, I don't know, in the small mid-size, whatever you call this, the size of your firm, there's not a lot of great role models for success partnership track creation. So how tell me if you whatever you're willing to share, like how did you sort of start identifying this individual was going to be on your partnership track? When you start signaling that, communicating that, and like what were some of the procedures, like assessing the books, evaluation, making agreement, you had an attorney, they had an attorney, that type of thing? Like maybe give us some of the details, for especially for people who are looking to build a partnership track.
Yeah. So as you know, and we'll talk about later, when I'm teaching the class, I have guest speakers come in every week. And so the guest speakers are people, in our industry or industry adjacent who I respect for one reason or another. So, I had Jonathan Hawkins. I don't know if you know him, but he's like the law firm with like.
Oh, okay.
And almost universal, everybody's advice is never take a the way that partnership deals can explode, um, countless. And when they explode, the amount of nasty that they can get is, can be immeasurable. And so, everybody's like, "Hey, never take a partner." And in fact, when I'm um, when I'm speaking to the students, my advice generally is like, think about the reasons you think you want a partner. Because generally, it's like a risk sharing maneuver.
Huh.
Do you really need one for the reason you think you need one? And my advice is generally like, no, you don't. Okay, I haven't followed any of my own advice or any of what the reason we ultimately did it. So this guy was well, first of all, let me back up. I got really lucky with my true partner, where we were 50-50. But things worked out as well as they did. Like we went into it not knowing all the stuff we didn't know, and we got lucky that we happened to work really well with each other. We um, we both like to do things that the other one doesn't like to do. We kind of fill each other's knowledge gaps in the way we operate, and so we have a very clear delineation of things that we're each responsible for that
Mhm.
evolved directly based on what we wanted to do. And so that has worked really well, and it's definitely I think in the minority of smaller where it does work that well. Interestingly, one of my other guest speakers, Tim Semmelroth, Tim from Iowa, he had a similar story about his partner and how great they've worked. So, I mean, it can work. Um, but John is our newer partner, and he was with us for 2 years before we offered him a partnership. And,
Mhm.
that was really in full transparency, it was like a golden handshake. Like we didn't want
Mhm.
to not work with him. And the writing was on the wall that if we didn't give him some sort of equity, he was going to do something else. Um, and we talked about like, okay, well, what if it's not a partnership structure, but it's a profit sharing structure, and all the ways that we could try to mitigate that. And for whatever reason, that just wasn't appealing to him. He wanted to be a true partner, and we felt like he had earned it and he deserved it. And after that much time, them and knew who he was enough that we didn't feel like we were diluting anything or giving away anything that was. So the second part of your question is, yeah, I mean, coming up with valuation was
Opposite,
we,
but
we agreed between the three of us to outsource to a legal company that we chose together.
okay.
They gave us a couple different models and said, here's model A, here's model B, here's model C, and so we think this model is here. Gave us the range. And then, me and Patrick thought it was too low. John thought it was too high. So that was a pretty good sign it was probably in the right place. Um, and so then we just had to figure out the terms. Okay, how are you going to buy in at that valuation? Um, that was a little bit of a challenge too, but what ultimately we came up with is that we did want to reward the sweat equity. And so the way we did that was on day one, we gave them the full partnership interest and he signed a promissory note. And for a certain period of time, we agreed to not charge him any interest on the promissory note,
Hmm.
give him time to pay it. We will take care of the partnership distribution to pay his. And then if it goes beyond a certain period of time, then we start to make interest on it. So he's incentivized to pay us back as quickly as
Okay. So it's like owner finance type of very generous type of that's great. I mean, because yeah, I think just in the plain simple, really take all the emotion out. It's basically find a good candidate, evaluate the firm, decide how many shares and at what value and the terms. With that's a lot there, and then sign, agree, and then they have to pay in, and that's a pretty big chunk of money. And then how do you continue to make things fair and evaluate that everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing as you continue along the journey. So quickly explained, but a lot of things can go wrong. But at the same time, if you can find that right equation, then it's beautiful because then you have more longevity, you lighten the load, you can expand your reach, and there's a lot of benefits that can come from it.
Yeah, I mean there can be, and for us, it's theoretically it's a portion of the business plan too. That
Right.
now he gets right of first refusal if we decide to sell, and so hopefully we're building a really healthy business, and so we'll give him the ability to pay us so we can.
Right. Right. And that in turn becomes a retirement or a policy in which you can transition policy. And so actually I was going to ask, so John, you mentioned does he compliment you, since you said you and your partner sort of are each in your strength? Like, what would you, in a situation where you're the only owner, or maybe there's two partners, like in your situation, what would you look for in a third or a second partner? Like, how would you, what are your attributes or skill sets are you looking for?
Well, so I think the first thing was that we didn't want to lose. Like
Hmm. That was important.
that
Yeah.
that was value in and of itself, and told us that he was important to us.
Hmm.
So I think that the kind of the most basic level I can kind of analyze it is that I'm kind of more of like a big picture and more of like the social and marketing and the management side. Patrick was
Hmm.
always like so the detail and really really good litigator, and part of that
Hmm.
was just being so detail oriented, whereas like I'm like not want to read the depositions. And so, early on, that's how we kind of divided things. Is I was doing a lot of the marketing and people management. He was doing the money management and the grinding. Um,
Yeah.
and then, as we both got a little older and both kind of pulled back a little bit, and maybe between the two of us, we might work a 40-hour week. Like, I think Chris and I probably both work 20-hour weeks.
Mhm.
John, who at that point was our employee, and so
Mm.
it was grinding out for us. So that's that's what he fit into that. Is it wasn't that it was a new skill that he was bringing in; it was more that he was replacing something that we were doing.
Yeah. So yeah, that term about like the finders, minders, grinders, and binders, and I have to sort of refresh myself when I think about that. It's from the David Meister book, Managing the Professional Service Firm. So finders are more like the rainmakers. Minders are more the managing and administrative. Grinders are more turning out the legal work, like you mentioned, and binders are those who are networkers and connecting. But I think sometimes maybe binders and finders you might be both or something. I'm not sure if you had to wear multiple hats. But I've heard some people say, "Would you want a partner who's not also a rainmaker?" I heard this discussion, but then I think there is a need to have a grinder, and not everybody wants to do the same thing. And I think that was great for you and your partner that you complemented each other so well, and you didn't like butt heads in terms of like you're good at this thing and he's good at that thing, and you sort of stayed in your lane, and it was pretty clear. I mean, I'm assuming from what you described, but I mean, because like the fact that you've been partners for so long, that's a great success story as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's and I think there's sort of an interesting dynamic to that I think is counterintuitive to a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
I like Teller. Do you know the magician's pen and
Yeah.
teller?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So, they've been around forever, right? Like they've been doing their thing for a long time, very successful in the magic and entertainment world. And what most people don't know is they're not friends. They don't really like each other. They don't like they have a professional relationship, but that's it. And so that is, there's something similar with me and Patrick. Like earlier on in our partnership, we would we thought that was part of it. Like, oh, we're supposed like our families are supposed to hang out. You're supposed to,
Uh,
and at this point, like we don't see each other socially. It's not like we don't like each other, but like it's not really part of the dynamic. Um, and so, I think that that's one of the things that people are thinking about is like, you know, going into business with your best friend. And I don't know that that's good, but it's certainly not required.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued when, like, partners or spouses, like, romantic partners, spouses, like, are in business together. I mean, I probably should have a couple of them on the podcast sometime, but I mean, I know some attorneys who have their firms with their spouse, but, I could see where you need to have some boundaries and some separation between work and personal life, but that's great. It works for you. It works for the firm. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Uh, so, that's it sounds like you found a good balance there and you were able to navigate the partnership track. And, I guess when did you start getting into your interest in teaching at a law school and law firm entrepreneurship?
Really more recently, so as we were kind of pulling back and working like in the business, doing less and less legal work, and kind of thinking about like, well, I'm 52, like, what's next? Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to be doing this forever. And so, there's only a few options for people like us. Um, so certainly like consulting is one
Mhm.
thing, and I'm doing some of that. And I'm doing some of that as well. But then the other, thing that seems like a natural transition is teaching, and especially when it's something that is willfully represented in the law. So, I think there's more people doing what we're doing as far as like, entrepreneurship and non-traditional law.
Yeah.
I don't think that has trickled down to law school in a meaningful way at this point.
Yeah, we basically there's maybe an intersession or one class, and maybe that class is every other semester, and there's not a lot of options and diversity and in that respect, and I mean, like, if I had it my way, I would want them to have, like, legal tech and, like client service, like break down the topics we're doing and have multiple classes if possible, or at least maybe like two tiers, like basics and then advanced, or you can go deeper into the subject. But that's how we got together. Ryan put us in touch because you're teaching in Seattle, I'm teaching in Houston, and I'm sharing resources in the book and everything. But I mean, I'm teaching later tonight, and I just love it. I love to see the excitement from what the questions that they ask. I like to hear what they're using and doing at the firms they're at. I like to see how they think. And then I love to bring great guest speakers to the class and make those connections happen. It's so much fun.
It's great. It's great, and that's my my favorite part for sure is the guest speakers, and so I have one every week. So my class it's a weekly class. It's 2 hours long. The first hour is and the second hour is like lecture and discussion based on the book chapters. And it's the stuff that they're getting from the speakers is stuff they can't get anywhere else. Some of these people are I would argue world class. The stuff they're talking about. And it's it's an education that I didn't even really start to get until probably like 6 or 7 years into my being a lawyer. But even
Mhm.
then, another couple of years of like figuring out how to grow a business and kind of who I needed, the groups I needed to be in, and the people I needed to hang out with. And so introducing that early on in this mindset, you know, I liken big law, well, all law firms basically a pyramid, and and the people at the top are making money based on the work of the people at the bottom. And and there's been this model and this mentality for a really long time that what you do is you go and you get your job and you grind and you grind and you grind. And then 10 years later, they make you a junior partner and then you grind. And then, maybe another 10 years and you're a senior partner and, whittles down the top of the pyramid. And that's when people start making money and getting the freedom they want, if they even get it then. Because at that point, it comes with other responsibilities. You might not even get it then. And so, this introducing to the students this mindset that like nobody else can make your future for you. And if you're working for a firm, and this is easy for people, for my students in Seattle to understand, because we're so tech heavy in Seattle. And
Mhm.
what we've seen is, all these Amazon employees, all these Meta employees, all these Microsoft employees who are making, $750,000 a year between their compensation and stock options, then all of a sudden they're all looking for jobs. There are these layoffs.
Mhm.
Nobody is paying them what they were making. They all then have to go and be like, well, I was a senior developer at Microsoft making, and now I got to maybe take a job for making $100,000. And, what do I do? And so I've really tried to hammer home to my students, like the only way to avoid that trap is to make your own business, because then nobody can take it away from you. And you're the only one that's responsible for your compensation. So if you want to make more money, then go make it. And I think that that's a little easier sell in a place like Seattle, where we're seeing the churn of these high-paid employees that all of a sudden are just out on their ass.
What like, when you said that you partnered up in, like, '07, '08, like, those years have major significance. Like, my husband graduated from B school in '07. Great year, wonderful. '08, no, not so not so bueno, like, I mean, my first attorney job came from me applying via a legal assistant position, but I said, "Hey, I'm an attorney, I wanna be an attorney," I was just trying to get my foot in the door, and, having my firm start in '09 during the Great Recession and everything. So, what I like to tell them and share is that very similar to what you're saying is like if you got to make it happen, you need to be able to have the skill set and you need to go hustle. And I don't want you to have to stay in a job just because you feel like you get stuck in that and that's the only thing that you can do. But like know that you have the skills or you can create the skills, and if you have the right mindset that you can do whatever you want to. And that's the way I look at it. Like that's why I want them to be empowered, because the recessions go ebbs and flows, the economy go ups and downs, things happen. And being able to be resourceful, I think is really critical, and not feel like you're just making a decision because you feel like you're painted in a corner and you have no other option.
And I mean, and that's the thing, is if you are working for someone else, at the end of the day, you have no other option. And so the only way to avoid that is to work for yourself, to own your own business, to be in charge of your own destiny.
Well, and I think that there are opportunities. Like, I really think that a lot of small and solo firm owners just don't know how to set up a partnership track. It just looks really overwhelming and scary, like opening up the books, doing evaluation, hiring attorneys, getting that sounds funny. But anyway, to put all of this together, and then if they might have the right first candidate, and then if they don't do it in right time, like you were concerned about losing your recent partner, like then you might lose that opportunity. And so I really think that's why when you were talking about it, I wanted to jump on this conversation, because I think there's not a lot of good role models for small and mid-sized firms on how to make a partnership track and be successful. And that's why a lot of times there isn't that succession planning, because they don't it's just like how we didn't have marketing, like 40 or something years ago, and we didn't have good we don't have really good role models on examples of how to sell a firm because we weren't allowed to do it. Partnership track in the small mid-size, like big firms, yeah, you just roll another name over and over, that they've got used to that. But small mid-size, and I think there's still a lot of opportunity where you can lean into a lot of work that was done by the founding attorney, if sort of like the stars align, and you can make them align. But but it's also the same, like if you want to be like that partner, you still need a lot of these skill sets that we teach in our classes. It's not just because you buy in and can work hard. Like you need to be able to rainmake. You need to be able to read a P&L sheet. You need to be able to to think about from a business mindset.
Yeah, the ownership mentality is hard to don't don't know that you can cultivate. I think that
Hmm.
there's kind of like an innate thing that isn't it? Sure, it's attributed to John Morgan, but I'm sure other people have said it. And,
Hmm.
people are either hungry or they're not. And if
Are
they're
you feeling
hungry,
overwhelmed?
then it's gonna come out in some way, no matter what path they choose. And so, you know, finding that hunger is definitely a huge component to knowing that somebody's going to be a good fit.
Yeah, I think that's similar to like drive. Like, how do you teach drive? And you could I think you have to have a little bit of it and maybe you can encourage it, but it's a key element in anybody that you want working with you or in a law firm owner, business owner. Are you feeling overwhelmed by all the different things you have to do to run a law firm? Well, you're not alone. So many law firm owners are in the same boat. That's where Staffy steps in. More than 90 firms, just like yours, are leaning on their bilingual virtual staff for legal, administrative, marketing, and client facing work, plus their full HR support. I currently have 11 team members with Staffy across my own firm and Power Strategy Group, and it's been a total game changer. Schedule a free initial consultation at staffy.cc, that's STAFI.cc, and use the code RUBY, RUBY, for $500 off. So I think we're getting to the fun fact question portion of our episode. And I wanted to ask, what is your favorite board game or card game?
Oh, there's so many good ones. I mean, there's one that we just started playing with my family. So my boys are 21 and 17. I believe it's called. That's the name of it, and I'm going to give you a bad resource, but it's something like Generation Gap or something like that.
Huh.
Um,
Okay.
and it's got it's kind of like Trivial Pursuit, but it's got four decks of cards, and so it's Boomers, Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, oh, and Gen Alpha. So it's actually got five decks of cards, and
Okay.
and so your team might be good at like
Is
the
it
Gen
called Mind the Gap?
Mind again. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Um, so we've had a lot of fun playing that recently because like we'll depending on how you divide the teams, like me and my wife might have we're obviously the Gen X experts, but we might be able to answer some Boomer questions. But then like when it comes to the Gen Alpha questions, the Gen Z questions, like we have no idea, and so it's there's kind of a place for everybody. It's a pretty fun game.
Ooh, I love finding a good one. Um, okay, so it's got like 1,213 reviews on Amazon. So, yeah, 4.5. That's pretty good. Okay, I'll have to check it out. I'm selfishly asked this question so I can find good ones. But right. What would you consider your superpower?
Um, yeah, I don't know if I really have one. I mean, I think that yeah, I don't know if I'd categorize it as a superpower, but I think grit, which is not that's not new, right? We've been talking about grit
Mhm.
for a while, but um, doing things that you don't want to do and aren't fun because you know that they're going to produce a result that you want to produce over time. I
Mhm.
think is underrated and very important, and the ability to get the shit knocked out of you a bunch of times and keep coming back from it is also a necessary life skill depending on it. And so I think those are important. And I don't know if I've got them as much as I would like, but I think I've got them.
Well, that's awesome. We have a resilience series, and it's just I'm talking more about it, like the importance of like overcoming, and that you grow through that hardship. And I don't know. I think about my kids are 13 and 15, and I think about like how I want them to be challenged so that they can grow and not just think that everything's going to be handed to them or that it's going to be cushy. Because I'm really thinking, well, this is a side note. I'm thinking about what's the world going to be like. The jobs that they're going to do don't exist. The jobs people are going to be doing in a year probably don't exist so much. But anyway, and I'm like, you need to learn some like skills that really lean in on being human. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like I grew up upper middle class. Like my dad was a surgeon, so he never didn't, he never didn't have money. Um, but I think that there's a balance between what you give your kids versus the lessons you need to teach them. Like I have friends who, you know, really, 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 really rich, and we were just kids in the car with my kids, and we drove by the car, and like my kids were like, "Oh, that car's really cool," and his kids are like, "Oh, that's how junk. Like, I would never be in that thing," and it's like a $60,000 car. Like to them, when dad
wow.
Ferrari, like a $60,000, and so it's just like having perspective about like the real world and what it's going to mean when mom and dad aren't paying for everything, and I think that that's important perspective as well.
Yeah, I agree. I was talking about this with a friend yesterday, and I was referencing Millionaires Next Door because there's a lot of talk about that. Like, how do you pass on that drive, and you don't just immune your children because they had a cush life, because you're trying to give them what you didn't have, but then sort of still give them that drive to be successful on their own. Okay, well, we sort of digressed a little bit, but I find that interesting. So. What would be a book or a podcast you would recommend?
Okay, so I don't I don't like to read a lot of nonfiction. I struggle with nonfiction. So
Okay.
I read a lot of fiction. When I say read, I'm going to be clear. I listen to audiobooks a lot. So
Okay. That's
so
so
my
fair.
drive is 30 minutes each way, and then I work out probably a total of like I don't know 5 or 6 hours a week. And so do the math. That's like a lot of time where I can just listen to something. And so I spend all that time listening to audiobooks. I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I like hard sci-fi. In fact, Project Hail Mary was great, which is now a movie with Ryan
Oh,
Gosling.
yeah. My son watched it this weekend. Yeah.
Really good book, and he's a very handsome man, Ryan Gosling. But so I resisted this book for a really long time. It had been in my orbit, and then finally I relented and gave it a chance. It's called Dungeon Crawler Heart, and
Okay.
it is a genre that's called literary RPG. So it's like a role playing game, like a Dungeons and Dragons, or like a video game that you play now, but it's a novel.
Okay.
And it is he happens to be in Seattle, but this guy in the middle of the night, basically the world collapses, and only people who are outside at the time are invited into the dungeons, which open up, like stairways down, and millions of people go into these dungeons, and it's a game that is set up by. I'm not going to spoil and tell you who set up the game, but to see, people can survive all these different levels and make it down to the final level. And this book, it's a series, so I think they're on book 6 or 7, and he said he's going to do 10 of them total.
Oh.
It is the most engrossing read I've ever had. Marathoned all the books that he had done. I can't wait for the next one to come out. I've listened to them multiple times. Like they're nuanced, they're layered, they're funny, they're emotional, there's concepts that make you think. It's like they're great. They're so great. And so you're gonna hear the recommendation and be like, that is not for me. It felt like it wasn't for me. Listen to the first one, and by the end of the first one, you're not into it. Call me, and I'll refund your honor.
Wait, can you say the name one more time?
Dungeon Crawler,
Okay.
and it's by
Okay.
Matt Goodman.
So when you said like underground, I was thinking of like Silo, and then I'm thinking like there's lots of game survival things like Hunger Games and Beast Games and what was that other one that went crazy? Like, so it's like a merger of a whole bunch of this crazy stuff. I mean, I don't normally watch that stuff because my family does because I'm already overwhelmed with all my immigration. But I do like it sounds interesting. So maybe I'll take a listen. So Jason, it's been great talking with you, getting to know you better, and I think it was valuable for our listeners. talking about the partnership track and your journey with your firm. And also we're sharing our stories about teaching, which I think law schools are, I think you pitched a class to your law school, right? And then you pull together some resources. And so I commend you for that. And I think anyone listening who's interested in that, feel free to reach out to either one of us. I'll volunteer us to help, inspire them, share resources and of the like. How can people find you, stay in touch with you, learn more about you?
Jason at premierlaw.com. You can email me. Premierlaw.com is my website. So however you can find me, I will respond. And let me give you, Ruby, before we cut it out, a plug. And the plug
Okay.
is, it was, I like you said, I put this idea to the law school, the local law school. They said, yeah, sure, we'd be interested in that class. And so I was like scrambling to kind of, come up with a syllabus and come up with, what am I going to read? And I was really fortunate that Ryan McKean said, hey, Ruby, and you sent me a copy of your book, and your book was like 99.8% what I wanted already. And so instead of having to do, come up with all these different things, I was like, hey, perfect. Ruby's book is now the reading material. You were kind enough to show me your syllabus that you use, and I am shamelessly copied your syllabus and have used it. So you have made it very easy for me to teach this class, and very low a low barrier for my upfront time to have to do it. And it's been a great experience. But plug number two is that going through your book, like we were talking about earlier, and teaching it again to the class has been a great resource for me to remind myself about things that I had, learned 10 years ago, or that I, knew but had forgotten, or that I'm now seeing through a different light because I'm seeing them again. And so, even if you have no interest in teaching a class, buy Ruby's book and go through it. It's not hard to read. It's slow. It's gonna coalesce, probably 35 different other books that you would have to read to put all into one place and give you the nuggets. And then, and Ruby doesn't claim ownership of those things. He'll tell you where the other thing is, so you can then go do a deeper dive if you want. And so, buy Ruby's book if you haven't already. It's a great resource. And reach out to us in class. It's a lot of fun.
Definitely echo everything you said. Thanks, Jason. I really appreciate that. And that was unprovoked. I didn't even ask you to thank you. That was really kind. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
No,
And that's really like, I think that's why I was saying like earlier, like me teaching the class, it's like me reinforcing a lot of the things I already know, already read, already heard, but like, oh yeah, am I doing that? Like, oh, I need to do that, that type of thing. And so I think it's very valuable for anybody who wants to teach this. There's a book out there already. There's a syllabus you can take it, create from there whatever you want and make it a low barrier to entry, and we can help change the world by teaching other future lawyers about how you get a leg up and running their own firm, and they'll be internally grateful and help better represent their clients. So thanks, Jason. So great to have you. Looking forward to being a guest at your class coming soon. And thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to Power Up Your Practice. I'm Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. We love your reviews. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us one and share this podcast with someone else so that they can know what you've been learning on our show. And make sure to check out the Power Up Your Practice book. It's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon. It's packed with 25 chapters of strategies to grow and streamline your firm. And we also have the free Power Hub community on School to keep the conversation going in between the episodes. So make sure to keep powering up your practice, and we'll see you next time.